Lancaster County is full of stories of spirits, ghosts, and the supernatural. I traveled to several of these rumored haunted locations to listen to their stories. Sit back and decide for yourself as you watch this special extended edition of Haunted Lancaster. We begin in Mount Joy, at a brewery tavern that dates back to the 1860s. It survived Prohibition, and to this day, people still seem to have encounters with the original owners. On a small back street in Mount Joy lies a brewery. It was built in the 1860s and then taken over by a German immigrant named Alois Buba a few years later. During that time period, the town tavern was a main center of commerce, providing food, lodging, and fine brews.
This is the roadhouse of the old days. There was a railroad station across the street. We have a guest register of people coming in here from all over the country for years.
While every town had a tavern, this one is different. Booby's brewery was built directly on top of a massive cavern system, composed mainly of limestone, and brewery owners took full advantage of these underground caves.
He turned the caves into what we call the catacombs, and that's where they used to have large casks of beer to age or lager the beer down there.
When Prohibition went into effect in the 1920s, the Buba family had a backup plan to stay afloat.
So during Prohibition, what they did, fortunately, the tavern hotel aspect of it is what saved it. The family continued to live here. They rented rooms, they served food. This has been a restaurant since 1879 when they built it, so they've been serving food to the public all the while, and they did that through Prohibition. And they served some illegal booze during Prohibition. It was a speakeasy.
The cavern system underfoot is rumored to have been a stop on the Underground Railroad.
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that slaves were hidden in there. Some of those presences from, the past couple centuries may still be here haunting the place. In an old tavern hotel, I contend that most of them are haunted to some degree because old tavern hotels had so much activity. I really think the more activity there is in a place, the more likely it is for some remnant energy to be left behind, and that seems to be the case here. Ghost research seems to lead one to believe that most of the people who see ghosts are ladies. Particularly my young hostesses, although not always, have been traveling down the hall in the cellar, and they see this young woman in a long dress. And she has her hair tied up. It's sort of a Victorian day dress that she's wearing.
The Buba family had a granddaughter with a mental illness. Instead of being placed in an institution, she was kept on this property, where she wanders the back halls to this day.
She's been seen, I'm going to say, around 20 times by all different people, many of which had heard nothing of this person, but they all seem to describe her the same way. Now, I'm enough of a scientist to say, I can't explain that any other way than it's some sort of ghost.
Buba's granddaughter isn't the only dark spot in this building's colorful history.
Right in our very entrance, where you first come in, on numerous occasions, our bartender, who can see the main entrance lobby from behind our bar, they see a person walking from the main entrance back into the interior of the building, always going the same direction, always late at night, around the same time, maybe between 2 and 2:30 a.m. And then they go to look, and there's no one there. And it's a male figure. We don't know much more about him than that, but that apparition's been seen many times. Upstairs in the old hotel, we have hotel rooms here. They've been in use since 1879 when the hotel was built. There seem to be a couple different ghosts there. One's a young girl. She woke up one of our guests, and he woke up in the middle of the night one night, and a little girl was talking to him in his bed.
One evening we were in the green room up on the 3rd floor, and my other musician friend, two of them. We were standing around the bar and the pole. It was the end of the evening, so it was very quiet. The music was done, everyone was getting ready to go to bed, and we were having those little bit of conversation before we all went to bed. And we heard this stomp, 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 and actually felt it through the floorboards, across the floor. And all three of us looked at each other. Did you feel that? Did you see that? Did you experience it? And we shared our experiences and all experienced the same thing.
With twists and turns and so much history and mystery swirling around the brewery, it's no wonder that people don't feel alone when they are here.
One of our people that's worked for us and played music here and so forth, late at night on, I think it was actually around Halloween, he went into the restroom there, and there are two urinals in there, and he was using one, and lo and behold, a man dressed in a tuxedo came in and came up to the urinal next to him, said hello, and went about his business, and literally they're right next to each other. And this gentleman I'm referring to, he knew that no one else should have been in the building, and he sort of finished and left. And you've heard the, looks like he's seen a ghost term. He certainly looked like that. And we went right back in the restroom, and there was no one there. Whoever it was gone.
So many of my friends have had experiences here, vivid experiences, and I can't take a picture here without having several orbs show up in it.
We have a ghost tour that we give here every other Friday night, and one of the tour guides that gives that ghost tour is Mr. Booby's great-granddaughter. She's a direct descendant of Mr. Booby, and her name is Jean Ellis. When the Ghost Hunters television program was here, she was the person they interviewed because she was a direct family member. This particular one has a neat feature. Because it was beer storage,
Whoa.
It had access to the cellars, you know, the beer cellars.
Holy creepy.
It's a good creepy shot, huh?
Definitely.
Yeah. This place deserves to be a museum. I mean, it has all the elements, the big old boiler, the tanks, you saw some of the barrels. It has just endless stuff. We even have the horse tack, and we have the tools they use to work on barrels, and the things they used to stir the beer with. I mean, it deserves to be a museum. But I'm really proud that we, instead of just trying to be another museum that you visit once and pay your ticket and go look at, we're still a tavern, restaurant, brewery, hotel. Just like in the old days, we still have hotel rooms. We still serve food, of course. That's our main focus here as a restaurant. But we have a brewery and we brew beer. So all the things they were doing here in 1880, we're still doing.
Perhaps a brief stop at this small-town brewery will have you questioning if ghosts really exist.
Oh, come, it's an experience. It's a labyrinth of experiences. There's so many different corners and niches in this place to explore, and each one being unique. And oh, if there's any curiosity in your soul, come here, because it's like entering another portal or another dimension. It's a vortex into another reality. It's pretty cool. It's like you're not even on this planet. It's like you're in another world.
You've seen the building and you've heard its story. Now it's time for you to decide. For Haunted Lancaster, I'm Peter Taraborelli. Welcome back to Haunted Lancaster. Our next stop is the historic Ephrata Cloister, home to some unique individuals with some slightly different beliefs. Without one man, there would be no town of Ephrata. The man was a hermit who came in search of a quiet, private space, but what he got was the complete opposite. His name was Conrad Beisel, and he arrived here in 1730.
This is pretty much the center of this community if you were here in 1730s. The founder of this place is a German man. His name is Conrad Beisel, and basically everybody here is German. It's a German area. It's settled by the English, but it's populated by German people. He arrives here in 1732, and when he does, it's kind of wilderness. There's really nothing else here. There's no Ephrata before this place. This is the first thing here. This is the community of Ephrata, and he gives it the name of Ephrata in 1736. It seems very structured, it seems very ordered, but actually, if you can kind of think of this as like one of the hippie communes in the 60s, there's really not a whole lot of structure. It basically grows organically around this very unusual German man. And it's kind of experimentation. There's a lot of experimentation going on here. Originally, there were these just men showing up, and he thinks this is going to be a community of hermits. And then women start showing up. He says, well, we're going to be a celibate community. Men and women are going to live separately. But then married people start showing up, and they're going to gravitate to the farms surrounding the settlement. The theology of this place is very important. These people basically believed that Christ was going to return very, very soon. Might be any moment, might be any instant. It's almost like this an apocalyptic element. Like they didn't have a date for the return of Christ, but they would believe it would be very soon, and they're preparing themselves for the arrival of Christ. So what they're doing is living a very unusual type of life. I mean, most Christians believe that Christ will return, and that's part of the Christian belief. But if you believe it's going to happen any moment, any second, it kind of speeds things up and makes some very unusual situations. So these people are basically preparing themselves to go to heaven. So they're living kind of an unusual life, and that's one reason they're celibate. They believe that when Christ returned, which would be very soon, he would actually take them to heaven, where they would actually enter in this very intense personal relationship with God, kind of like a marriage with God in heaven. And because these people were going to marry God in heaven, he believed they really didn't need to get married down here on earth, hence the celibacy.
Is there a dark side of the history of this place? Is there something that makes it creepy or spooky? What is it about this place that would make some feel on edge or raise the hairs on their neck? There's
been a lot of people living here. Probably a lot of people dying here. During the Revolutionary War, this was a hospital. I personally really I've experienced some little things here, but not very much here. But there have been accounts that we've collected and we've heard over the years. Conrad Beissel was kind of a restless person, and Conrad Beissel apparently had arguments with people, and a number of these people claim that after he died, he actually comes back and he visits them, kind of to torment them, remind them of some of the things they did. And they actually had an exorcist, kind of a spirit exorcism in this very building up on the second floor. And that's also one of the stories we tell. It's called The Wives of Christopher Beeler. And apparently this man who was associated with people here, he was kind of a cad, he was kind of a philanderer, and he had a number of different wives. Some of them died here, some of them became sisters here, but it involved a huge haunting that eventually a number of different people suffered from this, and they basically had an exorcism right here when they exorcised these goats. And there's a number of different people that claim that Conrad Beissel visited them as a ghost after he died. The idea of the separation between the living and the dead was a little bit more porous than it is today. People died earlier. They died for all kinds of different reasons, and there are a number of accounts from the 1700s and early 1800s of people seeing ghosts, loved ones coming back to them either to warn them of something they're doing badly and they better straighten up, or to say, I'm fine where I am.
You have an experience, a story to tell.
Yes.
Tell us your story.
So I've had several, but one of the ones that has stuck with me the most is that when I was here in 1993, part of my special project was to do some reading to supplement the archaeology that was going on. So I was going through all the translations of some of the documents written by the brothers and sisters. There's a book called the Chronicon Ephratense. It's sort of an autobiographical sketch, if you will. And then that's balanced by the book written by Ezekiel Sangmeister, Lubin and Vondel, who Ezekiel and Conrad Beissel didn't really see eye to eye about things, so you kind of balance those two against each other. And I had just finished reading about the Germantown Awakening and a woman by the name of Maria Hacker, who became known eventually as Sister Petronella. Now, Maria came here with her mother and father after the Germantown Awakening, sometime in the late 1730s, probably around 1739. They come first as householders, and then her parents join the community. We're not really sure when Maria joins the community, but eventually she becomes known as Sister Petronella. So I've been reading about her and the others that came with them, and I just came out and started doing my wandering around. And no particular reason, I found myself here at the cemetery. I had never visited this particular corner of the cemetery before that summer, but all of a sudden I find myself standing right in front of her grave. I wasn't even conscious of it at the time. It's just like all of a sudden I just looked down and there was her grave. It was like something had drew me to it, as if she was reaching out to me to say, come find me, come learn more about me.
So do you feel that there are still spirits here?
Yeah, I do. I think they're very happy spirits. I think for the most part, you know, every community is going to have, you know, dissent within it, but I think for the most part they were very happy here.
Now, more recent, we do have an account from the Depression. Up on the hill, there was a cloister family up there. They were householders. They were married members. They were the Zerfes family, and they lived on the Fairview farm. And there was an account of, apparently, people would come, hobos would come and stay during the Depression. People would travel and they'd stay in this barn. It was common knowledge that in this barn there was two places that you could sleep, one a clean bay, one so not clean bay. Apparently, if you stayed in the other bay, you had some experience, and then there were a number of accounts of people sleeping in this barn and being woken up by huge, loud sounds like beams crashing to the floor, latches being opened, the barn door above. It's a Swiss barn, so it's a two-level barn, and the door being open, and sound for heavy footsteps and sacks being moved around. Usually, sometimes this person would run fleeing from the place, sleep somewhere else, come back in the morning because he left his clothes or something, and he'd say to the foreman, "You got to go back with me. I'm not going to go back there." And they go in there, and everything was completely fine. Nothing had happened at all. No doors open, nothing on the floor, no beams loose, and this happened a number of different times. And so this was kind of one of the things that stays with this place. They don't know what the spirit was or anything, but this happened a number of different times in Depression.
There are a number of different accounts from the 1700s through today of people seeing or being influenced by ghosts. So perhaps the next time you visit the cloister, you may experience a presence that has yet to leave. You've seen the building and you've heard their story. Now it's time for you to decide. For Haunted Lancaster, I'm Peter Taraborelli. Our final stop takes us to the little town of Strasburg, and in particular to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. Surrounded by all of this history, there's certainly going to be a few spooky stories. Tonight we visit the Railroad Museum of PA, located in Strasburg. It's a unique location where the building itself isn't haunting, but the memories contained within are.
Well, here at the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, we have over 100 different trains and locomotives from throughout the history of railroading in Pennsylvania. So we have pieces that date back all the way to the early 19th century and pieces which are much more contemporary. And you can think of the vast number of people who have stories that are connected with those pieces.
The museum is jam-packed with railroad history. These massive machines shaped our country, while oftentimes misshaping their crew.
The railroading was, for much of its history, and still is, if not treated with respect, it can be very dangerous. We all have heard stories of derailments where crewmen and passengers were injured or killed. And some of those stories are attached to some of the pieces here at the museum as well. They said you could tell how experienced a brakeman was by how many fingers he had left on his hands. Because in the old days, you had to move between the cars to couple them together. And if the cars actually pinched together while you had your hands in there, you could easily lose a finger.
Working with tons of iron and steel was dangerous enough. Add in Mother Nature, and the combination is scary. This locomotive shares a connection to the Johnstown flood of 1889, where a dam broke, flooding a small railroading town in western PA. A torrent of 20 million tons of water, equal to the flow of the Mississippi River, was unleashed suddenly. It washed away the town and tossed locomotives like this one like toys.
A lot of the railroad workers were caught up in the flood itself, and many of them lost their lives. There is some thought that some of those stories have attached themselves to this locomotive. This is the last surviving H3 in the world, so it's the only place you can come to see the kind of locomotives that were present in and around Johnstown during the flood in 1889. And in fact, there have been some supernatural stories associated with it.
Horrific injuries aren't the only connection to the past here. Thousands of commuters boarded these cars daily to travel the country. After death, their imprints can still be felt and often seen.
Well, there's one story in particular. We have a staff member here at the museum who was coming through one day and saw the figures of an engineer and a fireman in the cab of this particular locomotive. And they were just staring out into space, as if looking off to the side at something that was approaching them. Not on the tracks, but something that was approaching them from the side. And it was the kind of situation where you looked at it 1 second, they were there, clear as a bell, when you looked back and they were gone. In fact, he was so shaken by that of course he immediately called his supervisor to ask if we had anybody working on that particular locomotive at the time, and we did not. We don't know of any specific incident tied to this specific locomotive, but perhaps some of that energy about the Johnstown flood has in a way attached itself to this locomotive.
Employees are not alone when it comes to the unusual here.
There are interesting stories of sightings of people in some of the trains here at the museum, which are not so easily dismissed, and those are the ones that we tend to focus on.
This particular car itself, in this P70 passenger car, we had several people say they seen a conductor on here. We do reenactments here a lot, but not that particular time when that happened. They said it was plain as day. They got on the piece because they seen the conductor say, "Oh, let's get on the piece of equipment." And as they came up into the inside, that person is no longer there. So they got back off to see if the conductor got back off, and there was nobody around the car. I was told twice about that. It's things we just can't explain.
It was my very first weekend working here, and one of our duties is to police the area, empty the trash cans and such. I was driving by the P70 coach, and as I drove by in the golf cart, I saw a couple of folks standing on these stairs. And as I drove by, saw them clear as day. A man and a woman. The woman was in the front, the man was in the back. They looked me right in the eye. Kept on going down the aisle, turned around to come back, and they were gone. I called my supervisor to find out what was going on. I thought maybe we were open early, and he said we were still closed to the public. Still can't explain what I saw. Saw them clear as day. I kind of a little unsettling. I didn't really come out here alone for a while after that.
Orbs, mysterious shadows, and ghostly forms still seem to ride these trains.
A lady approached me from behind me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "I need to show you something." And I said, "Well, what seems to be the problem?" She says, "Well, I want you to look at my camera. I have several photos on here of my granddaughter, but there's something in the picture." I said, "Okay." She said, "I was taking pictures of my granddaughter," and she says, as I was snapping the pictures, this face came in. There was somebody in the window next to her. I don't know who that is. The picture was so fuzzy, but it was only like 2 or 3 frames, and then that was it.
It seems, perhaps after all these years, both the spirit imprints as well as these iron giants won't be going anywhere.
We always try to find a way to explain everything, but when things like this happen, there's no explanation for it.
I think it makes it interesting. If there's spirits connected to these pieces here, it's a reason for me to keep my eyes open here at work. because I'd love to have the experience again.
We visited our Lancaster County locations, Booby's Brewery, the historic Ephrata Cloister, and of course the Pennsylvania Railroad Museum. You've heard their stories and hopefully come to some decisions. It just goes to show you don't have to go too far to experience the supernatural. For Haunted Lancaster, I'm Peter Taraborelli.